I've been looking for a way to make branching objects in Cinema 4D for a really long time, and it's always been, third-party plugins, Xparticles, and things like that. But now with the new particle system in Cinema 4D, you can do it right inside the software, so let's jump in and figure out how to do it. Okay, we're going to start off with a simple particle emitter. First, I'm going to go ahead and grab my simulate menu, and you can save this, as your default setup if you want to. But I'm going to start off with a basic emitter, and I'm going to rotate it around so that it's pointing straight up. And we're going to start off just with like imagining a tree going straight up in the air. So we've got our basic emitter going up, and I just want to add a little bit of wobble in there. So I'm just going to come in and add some turbulence, and let's make it 10 and 10 for the scale. And that's going to make it like wobbling all over the place, right? So what I want to do now is add a little bit of gravity in there. So we're going to put negative gravity in, and it's going to be like minus 50 for the gravity. So let's say some turbulence, some gravity. So now it'll be wobbling around and going up in the air at the same time, but I want to slow it down a little. Let's add some friction in as well. So good. All right, we've got some nice waviness. It feels believable to me, like a wobbly sort of thing growing up in the air, and I'm watching the path of this particle. And what I want to do now is take all of these things, and I only want them to apply to this one particle. So I'm going to put them in this particle group. We're going to call this particle group trunk. So we're imagining this as a tree growing, and this is the trunk, and this is also the trunk. Maybe I'll call this trunk group. Great. Now we've got the particle growing. We've got a trunk group controlling what it's doing. Let's now trace this particle. That's what we're actually going to use to grow things, right? We're going to trace the particle's position. So to do that, we'll use a tracer object. So I'll put that down below. So we've got the trunk group, and guess what? Trunk tracer. In this trunk tracer, I need to make sure my trunk group is in there, right? So it's going to trace the particle based on its group, not the particle emitter. That's important to understand. So right now we've got a line being produced, or a spline being produced, purely based on the position of that particle. Step one, we've got a trunk. Excellent. Now we need to figure out how to make branches on this trunk. And to do that, we need to create another particle emitter, and that will be a reproduce emitter. So the reproduce emitter is going to work based on the way we arrange it. So right now, it's just sort of shooting particles out all over the place, random, willy-nilly. What we want to do is have it only produce particles from the original particle, and to do that, we'll put it in this trunk group. So by putting it in that trunk group, it is now going to produce particles from that original particle during the duration of its existence. Right? So it's just shooting particles off all over the place. But it's following along, and that's exactly what we want it to do right now. But we want to tell it a little bit about how to produce particles. And so to do that, we need to add a condition. So we're going to add a condition. We're going to put it in this trunk group. We're going to put the reproduce emitter as a child of this condition. And then we're going to give it some parameters. So I'm going to say if the age of this particle is greater than 30 frames, there's a 50% chance that it's going to make a particle at any given frame. That's what this is saying right now. And so what you'll see is after 30 frames, it's going to start shooting off particles, and it's making fewer than it was making before. If you want it to make even fewer, you reduce this chance. So by making it 10%, it's only going to shoot off this many particles, right? So that's a good start. Let's rename this guy to be branches. And let's tell it to change a few settings. So under properties, I'm going to say speed inheritance. We're just going to give it a little bit of speed inheritance. So it's going to kind of walk a line between what I told it to be, which is 100 centimeters. It's going to walk a line between that and the speed inheritance, the original particle speed. If we did 100, it's going to inherit all of its speed from its parent particle and ignore this completely. So if I do this now, you'll see the particle speed is kind of matching the same speed that it's going at right here, right? So whatever works for you, either one is fine. I like to mix it a little bit, so it'll just give some variation. So we'll say 50, and then I want to have even more variation, so I'm going to say 100 centimeters and a 50 speed variance, and what we'll see is we're going to get a variety of speeds in these particles, right? So just adding some randomness. I also want to change the way these are being produced. Like right now, they're being produced randomly. I want to do them radially, so it's shooting off in a radius from the original object. Speed inheritance, I'm going to say 50%, and then the direction inheritance is going to control how much it follows the same trajectory as the original particle when the particles were emitted, when the secondary particles were emitted. So if I make this 100%, for example, all the particles will keep going along the same trajectory that the original was on, and they'll be shooting sort of straight up in the air, right? If I did that half, 50%, they're going to go somewhere in between where they were radially and where the particle was, so the branches will be shooting up in the air. And if I limit that, it's going to be closer to the original. So just depending on what kind of tree you're making and what you want the look and feel to be, you can manipulate these inheritances. Okay, so now that we're producing particles, let's go ahead and trace these as well. So what I want to do is make another tracer object. So we're going to go into MoGraph. We're going to create another tracer. And here we're going to trace this particle group, right? So these branches, if you come into the reproduction section, are being ported automatically to the particle group. So I need to rename this as branches group and go ahead and drag it down here, right? So we're just going to try to keep things orderly, right? So we've got our particle group, and our tracer. And then we've got our particle group, and our tracer. So this tracer is going to trace the branches group. And so you can see now the particles are being shooting off, and each branch is generating its own trace, right? So I'm going to do something similar that we did to the others. I want to have a little bit of variation in there and some wobble, but I want to control this independently, right? So I'm going to grab some turbulence and I'm going to throw it in this branches group. And now whatever setting I put in here is going to affect only the branches. So let's have the branches be a little bit more wobbly, or maybe I'll just increase this scale to like 10, right? So we'll give them a little bit more variation. Maybe the strength up to like 7, so just a little bit more wobbliness. Yeah, I'm not liking that so much. Put it back to 5. So right now we're shooting these particles off and they're going everywhere, but they're going on forever. And I want to kind of slow them down and stop them, right? So I'm going to do that with all of my branches, including the trunk. So let's start there. I need a way to tell this trunk to stop growing when it gets to a certain point. And I can do that based on age, or I can do that based on speed or distance. And I think I'm going to do it based on distance. And right now, it's about right there. I kind of want it to stop right here. And so I'm going to come into my trunk group, make a new condition. And I'm going to say that condition is distance traversed. And if that distance traversed is greater than, say, 600 centimeters, there's a 100% chance that that particle is going to be killed. So we'll put that in there and press play and see what happens. So we're going up to this point, and we're going to find out exactly where that 600 distance is. It's off my screen. So I'm going to actually make it less. We'll say 300. So that particle's died already. Let's try 400. So we're looking at the green guy. There's 400. We stopped right there. That's where our particles are going to end. Let's do the same thing with our branches. Okay, we're going to come to our branches. We can do a couple things to slow them down if we want to. We can say branch group. Let's make a condition, put it in there. And I'm just going to go ahead and control duplicate that one because I'm going to have two conditions that are going to change. This one's going to be age, this one's going to be distance. I'm going to say when my particles are greater than 5 frames old, I want you to slow down significantly based on this friction amount. So now they get generated and they slow down. And that's making the turbulence have a greater effect on them, so I might want to make some changes there. Slowing them down, and then the condition here, I'm saying if the distance traversed is greater than whatever number I put in here, I want them to be killed. And so if distance traversed is greater than 100 centimeters, they're going to die. And so now we're getting shorter branches, which is good, right? That's something I was looking for. Something interesting. So I don't want to make branches anywhere past, I know that this is dying at 400 centimeters, and I know that it's starting to make branches based on what I told it originally, right? So if we come into our condition for our branches generator, it's saying um, if the age is greater than 30 frames, and then there's a 10% chance that it's going to make it. But we could change this. What if we say distance traversed is inside a range of 20 centimeters and an upper range of 350 centimeters? It's going to produce these branches. What that should do is allow it to start creating branches, but then leave some space at the end where it is no longer creating branches, right? So the smaller this number is and the larger this number is going to determine like the space along that spline, how much of that space is being used to create branches. So if I make this 100, branches will start being created a little farther up, and then they're going to stop before it gets to the end. So that's kind of nice. I kind of dig that. So there's lots of different ways you can look at doing things. Okay. I'm going to have the inheritance of this guy be a little bit more in the trajectory. We'll say 50%, so that it's kind of shooting the branches upward a little bit more regularly. And I think I'm going to knock the turbulence amount down to like 2. And that's feeling more like tree branches to me. Okay, so to get this trunk to have a shape other than just being a spline, I'm going to use a sweep object. So I'm going to make a sweep. We'll bring it down here. I'm going to use an end side as my object to sweep. And then I'm going to sweep this trunk tracer, right? So I just need to tell it how big to be. Let's do like 15 or something like that, maybe 16. We're going to keep all of these settings on. We can turn this down to like 3. We don't need that many divisions. I think just to make things a little smoother for me, I'm going to turn this up to like a 12-sided object. And then let's go ahead and take the end scale and pull that down so that we get something that looks more like a trunk, where it's smaller at the top and fatter at the bottom. And now we're going to get this nice extrusion along as our branches are being made. Great. Let's do the same thing for our branches. And then we'll talk about how we can make sub-branches that are even small. Cool. All right. We're going to do the same thing again. We'll make another sweep object. Sweep. I'll call this one trunk sweep, and we'll call this one branch sweep. Same thing, I'll use an end side. That's a circle. I'm only using the end side because I feel like it gives me a little bit more control over how many polygons I have in my scene. And then put this in there as well. Make them, like these probably only need to be like 8, maybe even 6. And kind of same thing, make them a little bit smaller, turn this down as low as it goes, make the end scale smaller. All right, so we'll change settings now based on what we want to do with our branches moving forward. And I may need to end these a little sooner because I'm seeing these look a little silly at the top. And so I'm going to come back into my condition here for my creation, and I'm going to end it at like 300 instead. Yeah, it's looking a lot better, right? And then I'm going to make these a little bit smaller so they don't look so silly. Let's make them like 4 for our sub branches. So we're getting less of that like popping happening as they're growing out. So at the end of our 300 frames, we've got this, right? And if you decided you wanted something to be like tons more branches, you just come into your condition here and change, again, this percentage chance to be a lot more. You could change that percent chance to 50, and we're going to get a whole bunch of branches coming out. So that number is what's determining the branchiness of your object, and this range in this condition is controlling the start and stop of those branches. So 75, pop it up a little more. Cool. If you're interested in learning more about organic modeling in Cinema 4D for things like biomedical animation and what it's like to be a medical animator, I'll be launching a new course in 2025. You can sign up for my email list and get notified, as well as get a free gift. The link is in the description. Now let's talk about some sub-branches. To make sub-branches, one more step here. I'm going to pop this down a little bit more. So it's like, we'll just say 25% chance. To make those sub-branches, we're going to create yet another particle emitter, and this one is going to be another reproduce emitter. So we'll take this reproduce emitter, and like we did for the trunk group, we're going to put this reproduce emitter in the branches group. So it's telling all these branch particles to produce new particles. And you'll see now that that's what they're going to do. They're going to pop new particles all over the place, just like the original one did. And now I need to do the same thing I did for this trunk group and make a condition for those branches and tell them how to grow. So let's do that. Make a condition. We'll call this reproduce sub branches. And this is going to be an age, and we'll say, actually, we'll use distance traveled again. So distance traveled is greater than 10, or inside the range of 10 and I don't know how long they're going to be, 100 centimeters. There's a 30% chance that they're going to make particles. And for this one, I think we'll tell the sub branches to 100% inherit their speed inheritance. We'll keep them going radially. Actually, maybe we'll just keep it random. And then direction inheritance, maybe we'll do like 50%-ish. So that should slow these down considerably. And they're shooting off in the same direction kind of as their parents. And then now let's add some more conditions for them. So these subbranches have inherited a new particle group, and you can see that under the reproduction section called particle group. So I need to change this to be subbranches. And we'll put this down at the bottom of our list. Let's close some of these things up. All right, so this subbranches group needs the same sort of conditions that we have in here. So I'm actually going to copy these and control drag them into my subbranches. And then I can make some more changes, like maybe do a 5% scale and reduce the turbulence. Maybe the age value for the friction is going to stay close to the same, but we'll do like 1. And maybe the distance traveled is going to be like 50 centimeters instead of 100, right? So now these should be shorter, and then they'll die. So you can see them disappearing like little fireworks, right? And from here, of course, we want to trace these objects. So let's trace this subgroup with a new MoGraph tracer. And in here, we'll say subbranches. That'll give us our splines that we can use to make new branches from. And you can see how long those are right now. I think they're a little long. So depending on what you're going for, I think they're also a little bit too wavy. So let's turn the turbulence down to, I don't know, 0.5. And let's make this kill distance be something like 30. That's looking a lot better. And then let us take that and create a new sweep object. Maybe I should save this. Cool. Okay, so we'll make a new sweep object and bring that down here. This will be sub branch sweep. It's going to be another end side. Sweeping this tracer, and this one can probably just be like 4 or 3 or 2 even. And then we'll tell its end scale to be tiny. Let's just make some adjustments so we can make these a little bit longer. So we're slowing them down. These are the secondary branches, right? The first group of branches. We're telling them to die after they're 100 centimeters. I'm going to say 200. Okay. And then the sub branches, they're going to die after 60, and they're going to be produced between a range of 50 and 150. I mean, that's pretty cool if I do say so myself. So you can always keep making some changes to this to get the look that you're going for. But just real quick before we do anything else, I'm going to save this and just show you one more thing, and that is that this is being generated from one single particle, right? So this is making one particle, and that single particle is generating the rest of these using the system we set up. So if you wanted to do something more complex and a little bit more sort of organic or like, you know, just play around with something a little bit weird. You can go up to your initial particle, your trunk generator, and change the properties in its emission to be something like, for example, a sphere that is 1 by 1 by 1, and make something like 6 of these. And it is now going to shoot these off. It's using gravity right now, so I'm going to turn off this gravity function, and it's basically going to shoot these off now from a central component, and then follow whatever trajectory it wants to follow based on the seed values in there. But just using some simple thing like this, you can start to make some really fun things. You could even like grow a forest if you kept the gravity on and used like a circle and made this circle huge, right? So let's say it's like 600 by 600, right? So we've got this 600 by 600 circle. It's going to randomly generate 6 trunks right now, and each one of them is going to be different and have its own branching systems based on the information that we just built. So pretty cool. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and got something out of it. If you have, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in a future video.